Welcome back to the Middle Tech Spotlight series, where we highlight entrepreneurs, investors, and ecosystem supporters that are building our startup community. Today, we're talking with Adam VanWingerden of Silver Fern Group. Silver Fern Group is building software to help growers simplify their horticulture business by making their data more accessible to be mined and managed. We talked with Adam originally back in July of 2020, right when he was first starting the business. So he's learned a lot, encountered a lot of challenges, and had a lot of successes in the past 3 years of building the business. So we're excited for you guys to check back in with Adam and Silver Fern Group. And before we dive in, we just want to get a quick word from our sponsors. Before highlighting our sponsors, we'd just like to state that the views and content shared on this platform do not necessarily reflect those of our show sponsors. Middle Tech is presented by KY Innovation, the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development's Office of Entrepreneurship. KY Innovation exists to support and develop Kentucky's startup ecosystem, and we are proud to be supported by an organization whose mission aligns so closely with ours. If you're a founder building in Kentucky, you need to check out the resources that KY Innovation has to offer. You can find more information by clicking the link in our show notes or going to kyinnovation.com. Welcome back to the Middle Tech Podcast. We are here with Adam VanWingerden, CEO and founder of Silver Fern Group. Adam, it's been a while since you've been on the podcast, so welcome back. We're excited to highlight what you've been up to since we had you on originally. I'll link your last episode in the show notes for anybody that wants to go listen to it. But to kick us off, just kind of give us the high level on what Silver Fern Group is.
Yeah, it's great to be back, Logan. Silver Fern, we pretty much, we help growers, mostly indoor growers, but a lot of our customers also have some outdoor grow operations as well. But we help them essentially mine, manage, and monetize on their data. So we do everything from demand planning, production planning, procurement, inventory control, basically the core operational functionality that a grower needs to operate. We provide the software to help them run those operations. So we pretty much do everything but the accounting.
So the story of you starting this company, you're not the only one with this experience. It runs in your blood. So kind of connect the dot between your family history briefly and starting Silver Fern in that journey.
Great question. Yeah. So I think I might have mentioned this in the other podcast, but real quickly here. So yeah, my family, my Opa had migrated from the Netherlands during or after World War II. He had a bunch of kids, 16, 12 boys. All of them are in this space in some form or fashion, whether they're in the genetic space or whether they own a greenhouse, they build a greenhouse. And so before we started Silver Fern, we had worked at a place called ColorPoint, which was the 7th largest grower in the United States. That was my dad's operation and my uncle's operation. And then when they sold, myself, my brother, and our business partner, Kevin, we were all at the time working at ColorPoint. And then we all broke off to start Silver Fern. But yeah, the growing aspect in the horticultural industry and ag kind of runs in our blood.
Yeah, and because of that background in ag, the last time we had you on was after we had talked about your company. We had you on to talk about app harvest and everything. So I'm sure we're going to get to that point of the conversation, giving your thoughts on the latest with app harvest and them filing for bankruptcy. But tell us, when did you start the business? How long have you been running it?
Yeah, so we started the business in February of 2020. So it was right as COVID was kind of getting off the ground, I guess, or it was being taken seriously. So it's been, I guess February, the upcoming February will be four years in business.
Yeah. And I think that was right around when we had you on the podcast. Actually, it was pretty early on in your journey.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember back. You mentioned the older podcast, and I'm trying to think, what we even covered, but it was really early on in the stages of starting up.
Yeah. It was like right when COVID hit. I remember we were in Awesome Inc. Okay, but let's talk through starting that business and kind of what's happened since we had you on very early on when you started it and where you are now. So first off, let's talk about fundraising. Did you fundraise for this business? How did you approach fundraising? Let's start there. Yeah,
so no, we're still fully bootstrapped. And I don't think we are against fundraising necessarily, but we've liked being bootstrapped to this point. I think that there are some companies in certain industries where it's imperative to go do venture capital and go raise money, specifically if speed to market's imperative, or if you really need to get off the ground and quickly. For us, with the economic barriers to get into the space and the legacy incumbents, the kind of incumbents in the space, we felt pretty comfortable kind of going slow. And again, it's not to say that we're not against raising money, but we really felt like that to find a partner that's really aligned with what we want out of Silver Fern, we haven't needed to. and we're not planning on doing it. So we talk with different firms and we entertain it, but we haven't pulled the trigger, and it's not our intention to do that.
What kind of challenges does bootstrapping present?
A great question. I think there's a bunch of different things I would say but some of the biggest challenges are the ruthless prioritization of resource allocation. I think you really have to think, because all the money that we make right now pretty much all gets dumped back into the business. Now, because we're a tech company, most of what that includes is overhead or people, and prioritizing who we want to bring on, prioritizing where we should invest our time, what product we should build, what functionality, what features. We can't really take that shotgun approach because of resources. And so we really have to prioritize ruthlessly and make sure that we have a very strong pulse on what the market needs and what we could sell immediately. And so for us, I would say it requires a lot of discipline, specifically in how you invest that money. And the mistakes are just so much more costly. So I think that's the hardest piece for us is thinking about and prioritizing what products, functionality, and what resources that we're going to be investing in.
And then the good part of it is you maintain a lot of autonomy, you maintain control, and then you get all of the upside. Is there anything outside of those benefits that you want to mention?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. I think to those reasons you just mentioned, I feel like that's where it's so hard to find the alignment with a different firm, and most of them too, the funds. I mean, they're not that long. I mean, they want to flip them in 5 years, let's say on average or something like that. So it's really hard to find a partner that's in it for the long term. Is going to be aligned with the vision that you have for the company. So for us, maintain that control, growing slowly is kind of what we want to do and build a lifestyle business out of this. So I think for us, it's just VC money has not been as attractive.
Yeah, makes sense. Talk about some of the challenges you've encountered along the way over the past 3 years of building the company. What kind of comes to mind as things that were hurdles you guys had to figure out how to get through?
Well, great question. I would say some of the hurdles are still being hurdled. I feel like I was talking with someone today, and it's honestly, I don't know if embarrassing is the right word, but to think about how I thought about things 3 to 4 years ago versus today, it's like astronomically different, specifically on the how to run a business.
Yeah, let's dig into that. I think there's probably some good learnings in there. So elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I think the vision for Silver Fern has always kind of remained the same from the start. And yeah, it changes a little bit as you go. For the most part, we've always had the destination in mind. I think the how to and how to get there has changed over the last 3 or 4 years in different ways. I think for us, the how to over the last 12 months has really gotten the fog, feel like it's been lifted, and it's gotten a lot more clear on like how we're going to get where we want to go. And I think the biggest thing is, myself, my brother, and Kevin, we're all pretty entrepreneurial. We like to move quickly. We like to make decisions. We like to kind of fly by the seat of our pants and fire from our hip. And I think that we had incorrectly associated systems and process with bureaucracy, red tape, and that wouldn't give us that kind of flexibility, right? And don't get me wrong, when we started early, we needed to be able to kind of fly by the seat of our pants, shoot from our hip. You just have to go, right? You have to create value. You have to move quickly. But it's just not repeatable at all. You can't scale complexity. And so for us, over the last 12 months, really thinking about how do we simplify our business? I used the example, or someone's used it in the tech space of, a jazz band sounds really good with 3 or 4 people. The minute you have 15 people, that jazz starts sounding pretty chaotic. And so for us, thinking about, hey, I was telling our team a couple of weeks ago, there's 2 ways to cut down a tree. You can hit it with one guy with one axe in the same spot 1,000 times, or you can get 10 guys with 10 axes and hit it in 10,000 spots. And the tree falls down eventually, but one is not repeatable and not scalable. And so for us, to this point, we've been really good at grabbing 10 people and getting that tree to fall down. But it's just not something that we can look at doing in the future. And really for myself and for Steven and Kevin too, if we want to work on the business and not work in it, right? We have to be able to put systems and processes in place and then put someone to maintain that system and process. So we've really been thinking about our business and breaking it up into business units much more like, okay, well, we have DevOps, right? So let's just say we're using Agile as our system to run there. We have CI/CD, we have customer success, we have whatever the different business units that are in our company, thinking about how we can systematize them, how we can, put process in there, and then how we can hand that over to someone to maintain that system and process.
Yeah.
So
I think to go off of that, I think the importance of systems and processes is to build a foundation to build on as a business. Because if there's just pure chaos and you don't have those things, stuff slips through the cracks. And you've got to just have documentation of your business. You got to have a system of records. If you're just taking in data from either customers or your product and it's not going anywhere productive and you're not analyzing it regularly and creating systems as a team and delegating who is responsible for what, then stuff falls apart and you can, mess up a customer relationship, or you could, do something wrong with your finances. And the more things you have in place, while it might feel like bureaucracy and unnecessary processes, it's hard to build a business without that foundation, is the way that I've kind of come to learn, because I'm all for chaos. Like, everybody that knows me, I can shoot from the hip too, but you can only do that so long before, it's not sustainable. And if you want talented people around you, talented people need guardrails. Yeah.
It's like that perfect example is, I'm the same way. I think most entrepreneurs, that is the enigma, right? That's the problem. And we're talking again with the team. It's like, look guys, we have rocket fuel. It's great. It's exploding everywhere. So if you want propulsion on a rocket, what do you got to do? You got to take that energy and you got to put some guardrails up, and that's the only way you're going to get propulsion. Yeah. And for me too, I felt like, we thought it was like, hey, just put a tool in place. No, a tool's just a tool. You got to build a system inside. You got to build a process inside it. And I think for us, the game changer really was we started doing entrepreneurial coaching. We worked with a company called Strategic Coach, Dan Sullivan. He's been in the entrepreneurial space for 30, 40 years. And so we go out and get coached once a quarter. And that was really kind of the pivotal kind of aha moment when we started really figuring out, people talk about getting the right people on the bus, finding the right seat for them. But actually giving some pragmatic tools and giving some things to actually figure out, well, what does it actually mean to get the right person in the right seat? Like, who are your systems creators, right? I'm a horrible system creator. And now I'm confident when someone comes to me and says, hey, Adam, we need a system on how to, keep tasks on track in our, CRM. I'm going to look at them and be like, dude, I'm not your guy. Now this person over here, they can help you. Right. And then me knowing that I need to be help managed. So I tell our project manager, like, listen, I need you to help manage me. Right. So having some of those kind of frameworks to think through and some business philosophy and mindsets to actually look through our business through those lens has been absolutely pivotal.
I like what you said about tools there, because I think people love to adopt tools and think that you bring a tool in, it's going to solve problems. But oftentimes it just adds complexity and it adds chaos unless you build it into, like you said, the processes and systems. So if you have a CRM and you want to be diligent with it and stay on top of it and be disciplined with keeping customer records up to date, you got to build something into your daily culture that forces that habit. Or if you're analyzing how customers are using your application and you're analyzing the visualizations of their usage, like you got to build that into your weekly meetings and say, hey, what does this mean to you all? You can't just expect things to come and emerge out of that. You got to make sure you set a purposeful discussion point within a meeting to make sure that process sticks.
That goes back to the thinking back and being embarrassed. It's like literally that's, 4 years ago, I remember like, wow, we're going to get ClickUp. We're going to get Monday or whatever.
You were talking about that so much.
So we got a tool.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, stuff's not going to fall through the cracks anymore. And it was literally, there was no rhyme or reason to it. We would just put random tasks in there. Some would go in there, some wouldn't. And it was literally just like not being helpful at all. It wasn't until we still use it, but it wasn't until we said, okay, no, this is a tool. We have to still build systems and processes within that tool. It's not just enough to have, what's hilarious is too, that's what we tell our customers about our software. I say, look, I can give you the best chainsaw ever. Yeah. But if you're used to using that hatchet to cut that tree down, it doesn't matter.
Well, one thing I think is important is, especially as you're growing in the early stages, is to let the tools and processes organically emerge. And then when one starts to show promise, you make sure you just really stick on it and like, don't let that go away. Because, I think that with so many tools these days, whether it's Notion, Slack, ClickUp, Jira, there's so many tools for task management, wikis, where do you put your information as a business? You just have to kind of watch your team and see where they naturally gravitate towards, recording information. When you see a trend, just, systematize it. And I think it can't really be top down in the early days until you start to see trends emerge, because if it's too top down, people won't want to use it.
Oh, and I would even take that. I agree with you. I'd even take it a step further too, of just like, again, realizing that the way my modus operandi, how I commit action against the work that I do, I am not someone who is going to create a system. And so when I try to create a system, it's not a good one because I'm a multiplier. I just create content and a bunch of different stuff and it ends up being confusing. I'm not a simplifier. And so to put the right people in charge, whether they could be, they don't know where they are in the org chart, but if they're systems people and process people, and that's the way they organize, to put those people in charge of identifying, hey, where are the areas, the business units that really need to help and systems created to manage the work.
And how are you figuring out what your team's strengths are, or like what their personalities are, what they're going to be best at? Because that's something that Evan and I have actually been talking about just on the side, is like the Strengths Finders test, the Myers-Briggs test, the Enneagram. Are you guys using stuff like that? Or like, how are you teasing out, what somebody's strength actually is?
That's a great question. So part of the curriculum of some of the stuff that we've been learning, they talk a lot about, it's not really a personality test, but one of the assessments that they talk about is called a Colby. And that's pretty much been a very pivotal thing that we've used at our company. So their theory, and I'll try to keep this brief, but there's 3 sections of your brain: your cognitive, which measures your IQ. Then there's your EQ, which kind of is your personality. You're kind of like your Myers-Briggs or your Enneagram, whatever. And those are the 2 that mostly people focus on, right? They want to measure your IQ, your ability to solve problems, logic, etc. Then you have your personality, like your Myers-Briggs, your Enneagram, like we said. But really what people miss is your cognitive side of your brain. So that is literally pragmatically speaking, how you commit action against the work that you do. So your modus operandi. And it to us has been so helpful, because it's like, hey, if you were given a set of a project or any kind of set of work, what is the first thing you do? How do you commit action against that work? So certain people want to gather all the facts, get every single detail. Certain people want to organize, plan a way of attack, right? Certain people just want to start. They just want to go. Certain people want to test the materials immediately. So really getting people, we have our whole company take it when we're recruiting too. It's like, if you're hiring a project manager, if you're a project manager and you are not a high fact finder and you don't have high follow through, you're not very organized, odds are that is not going to be a good position for you. And so for us, really seeing how people commit action against the work that they do, and then us doing the due diligence to see what we want from a specific role. What do we want from our product owners? What do we want from our client partners? What do we want from our sports specialists or senior engineers? And so for us, that's been a huge one to kind of assess how do people work and how they commit action against the work that they do.
I love that. And I feel like those are all really relevant things that were reflected in the early days of the startup that I'm with too, at LeadRel and into Sales River. Just figuring out, one, who fits in the role in the best way. And then also, I like what Evan was saying about the emergent properties of like organization. Because in the early days, like nobody really tells you how things are supposed to function. It just kind of starts happening, and then you start having to layer on the guardrails on top. So I think those are some really good takeaways. Talk a little bit about some successes that come to mind. So what are some things that you're proud of that have gone on over the past 3-4 years?
Wow, there's a lot. I'm really proud of the team that we've built. I feel like genuinely we have one of the best teams in the industry, and specifically in the world that we're in. I think we've built a team that I think really is going to be able to serve the industry for years to come. I think we've had some major success with some really big customers, and we've been able to expand with those customers. And so to me, that's a really good measure of success, to be able to kick something off. Maybe it's at a small scale with a big customer, and then win their trust over and do really well, and then wanting to have an expanded contract. So, over the last 2 or 3 years, I think there's been 6 or 7 key customers that we've been given opportunities to grow with. And I think that's always very, I think, confidence building. And we really haven't done anything as far as any kind of SEO, sales, marketing. It's all been kind of word of mouth. And that's been fairly intentional up to this point, because I feel like if we did try to get the funnel and brought a bunch of customers in, we'd break, because we just don't have the systems or the infrastructure to be able to support that kind of intake. So yeah, I think that's, those are some of the big successes of just organizing the team and just seeing being able to grow with existing customers builds a lot of confidence in us and our team that we're doing the right thing.
What's it like working with family? I think that a lot of founders start a family or start, a company with a family member, a brother, a sister, or even a spouse. What's that been like for you with your brother?
Oh, it's awesome. I love it. I think there's the dynamic there, like it's family. So sometimes people think that we're in a huge fight and really we're just kind of, duking it out as brothers and trying to find the best idea and the best solution. But I think, there's pros and cons, of course, just like anything, but I think the pros outweigh the cons. I think there's just so much synergy that we have, that we've worked together for so long, in different areas. And so we're really able to feed off of each other. For us too, it works well because we have really different skill sets. But I think it's, overall there's challenges to it. But I think it's one of those things where if you can figure it out and you can figure that dynamic out, I think it's awesome and I'd recommend it. I think ultimately it just takes humility though, on both parties. That I think it's easier with a sibling to kind of lack that humility and not that wanted to defer and want to talk over them. And so to constantly be reminded to be like, hey, let me come into this with humility and stay humble and ask a lot of good questions and seek to understand, not be understood. But yeah, I'd recommend it. I like it.
Talk a little bit about, so Evan was talking about a question. I'm sorry to steal your question here, Evan, but the role of venture capital in this space. So we're not necessarily talking about Silver Fern at this point, but I think this is a good kind of segue to talk about some of the app harvest stuff that's been going on lately. We talked about this on our Monday episode this past week about app harvest raising all of that capital to do what they're doing. In your opinion, is that the right way to build a company in this space, to raise that amount of venture capital, or raise venture capital at all? Should it be done via debt or in another way?
That kind of goes back a little bit to previously in our conversation. I think, I don't know if there's like a objective black and white yes and no specifically to that question. I would say that, when you're starting a business, whether it's a tech company or I think App Harvest position themselves as a tech company is kind of what it felt like, honestly. But when you're looking at some of those things, I think you really do have to do your due diligence. And the problem with App Harvest, I don't think necessarily was the fact that it went the VC route. I think the fact was they weren't realistic about their valuation. They didn't know their actual marketplace. They didn't know that people didn't want to buy a tomato for $6 or whatever it was. They could have raised the money, but they wouldn't have got the valuation that they got. They wouldn't have, had to leverage equity leverage. So it's one of those things where I would say like in a vacuum for our industry specifically, I think no, it's probably not the right move, generally speaking, for what I know about the industry. But that being said, I don't necessarily think like you can just say that objectively, like across the board. Like, no, it's like, well, under the right circumstances, with the correct evaluations. And, we have other either tech companies or other people in the space that have went the VC route. I mean, there's a company that is in the space called Unu that does a lot of like inventory control stuff, and they've raised a lot of money and gone through some acquisitions and stuff. So, I mean, it's like a yes and no thing. I would say, just generally speaking, I guess if you had a, gun to my head, I'd say no, don't do it. But I think you got to look at it. It's a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, I'm sure it also depends on the business model, what type of margins the business is going to be operating on. I think if it's a software play in the ag tech space, that makes a lot more sense. Whereas if you're taking a commodity play, like trying to grow produce in the way that App Harvest was, that makes it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, the fundamental problem was when they look at their acreage and they said this is the return on investment per acre, and it's off by 5, 6, 7 times. Nothing's going to fix that. Right. It's it is, you could even raise debt against it and it's not going to fix that. And so that's fundamentally the problem, is not necessarily the VC or debt raising. It's like, hey, the problem is they just didn't do their homework.
What do you think the fallout's going to be? They just filed for bankruptcy, supposedly selling all the assets. What's the fallout of this going to be for ag tech and then more specific to Kentucky, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I talked a little bit about this when it was kind of all, crap hitting the fan. But I think for Kentucky, it's a bummer. I think this feels like it's happened over and over again in different ways. Everyone gets excited and, oh, this is new, economic growth coming to the state. Look at what they're doing for this county. Look what they're doing for Appalachia, whatever it might be. And then sure enough, just a failure. And so that's a bummer to see. And I think, there's only so many times people can get, slapped across the face or sucker punched where it starts being like, that's just, the trust is going to be gone. I think about AgTech Scientific, which was kind of what the company that bought ColorPoint, hemp company, they went bankrupt too. All the promise, right? To Bourbon County and all the economic development they're going to do, and failed. I think in the ag space, those facilities are really nice. I mean, they're beautiful, state of the art facilities. You're going to have guys like Winset, guys like Mastronardi. They're going to come probably purchase it. They're probably going to love. They're going to love it. They're going to get it at a really good discount, and they're going to expand their operations. And what it's probably going to do is cut out some of the contract growing, or some of the smaller growers that grow for those larger greenhouses. They're going to have to kind of pivot and change their business model. But at the end of the day, that's what's going to happen. That's going to get used, right? The facilities and the greenhouses are already used. But honestly, everything else from AppHarvest, I don't know about I know they made an acquisition in the tech space and some IoT devices and stuff. I doubt anything will come of it. Probably get dissolved.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's unfortunate. We were rooting for them. I mean, from the early days, I remember when they founded and we were talking about it. You said, these numbers are not real. This is not possible. So, I mean, the industry, from what you're telling me, saw this from the beginning. And, AppHarvest was kind of an outsider that came in on ridiculous numbers. That's kind of the perception that you're giving off.
Yeah, man. I think that's what's so interesting, was just the hubris. And it's really sad.
Yeah.
It is, because honestly, this probably happens in other industries and other spaces, but it was kind of weird for me, honestly, to have a front row seat to be like, look at all the smoke and mirrors, look at all the excitement that's happening right now around this. And it was really exciting. I remember when it was getting announced and we were at Awesome Inc. kind of shooting the breeze about it. But like, it's just, I think getting into the space and just looking at the numbers, everyone was like, this doesn't pencil out. And then anyone who was someone in the industry was like, oh, has AppHarvest talked to you? Nope. Anyone. No one had any relationship with AppHarvest. They were kind of running this thing by themselves. And so, I mean, this goes back again. We already had a podcast about this, but just honestly, what it really is weaponized finance. They try to use that SPAC to get on the public market. There's a lot of people who made a lot of money. And that's what's kind of sad. And then the retail investor is the one who gets absolutely squashed. And the people in Eastern Kentucky and in Southern Kentucky who are working there.
Yeah. So to bring it back to Silver Fern, what's next to kind of close this out? What are some things on the horizon for you that you really want to accomplish over the next few years?
I would say what we're really working on is, to pull back from the initial, what we were saying earlier, was really putting in the systems and processes in place to scale. I think for us is like, hey, we haven't really poured any gasoline on the fire. It's been 4 years and we feel like we're still kind of stoking it and getting things right and positioned right, to really kind of start working on our sales and our marketing and our funnel and really pour some gas in the fire when it comes to getting that SEO out there, like really kind of focusing on getting those customers in. And so for us, I feel like over the next 12 to 18 months, it's dialing in all that infrastructure so we can really kind of, I feel like we've got a tiger by the tail, and it's kind of just aiming it in the right direction and letting go. So for us, that's kind of the focus, is getting the right people on the team, moving some pieces around, handing over some systems, some really talented people, and then bringing customers in.
And you're wanting this business to be a lifestyle business. So you're wanting to continue running this into the future and impact this industry and carry on this legacy that your family has kind of established.
That's a great question. And yeah, for the most part, that's where my head's at. That's where Kevin and Steven's head's at. Like ultimately, like if we feel like we can build a business that can be a self-managing company, that we can have a really talented team that's able to take it and run with it, and we get to work on the business, not in it, and we're making a difference in the industry. That's what I would love, and to make this thing a generator, an economic generator. And that's never to say we're never going to sell or never do any of that, but that's not our intention. That's not what we're looking for. Right. And so again, it goes back to like, try to find a VC firm that's aligned with that.
You're not going to find one.
Yeah. I think that's just worth calling out because, a lot of the tech companies we talk with, a lot of the software companies, they are playing for that exit. They're VC backed, and that kind of locks you into that sort of place. I think it's an interesting model to go after it in a different way there. But Adam, it's always great talking to you. It's fun just hanging out and talking about what's been up with you lately. So thanks for coming on the podcast and updating us on Silver Fern, and we're excited to keep on watching and be along for the ride.